And we're live once again on another Tuesday and got an exciting guest in the house today. So Diane, I'd like you to just go ahead, introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll just get stuck in and start talking about your top tips for virtual presentations.
Well, thank you, Jillian. I'm Diane Windingland with Virtual Speech Coach, and I've been helping subject matter experts for several years now become more clear and confident in their presentations. Now, for some tips, I thought I'd like to start out with the online presence that you have with people virtually. And so I do have a few slides to share on that if you can get that going.
Absolutely. So there we go.
So this is kind of a fun thing. If you've ever played Spot the Differences between two pictures, this is where you get to try to spot the difference between picture number one and pretty soon picture number two. Now, this is very similar to how I look right now. And here is picture number two.
That's the COVID picture.
Yeah. So Jillian, maybe you can note some things that you see different on picture number two than picture number one.
Well, of course, the background. So that, and that's a huge thing of we must always be aware of what the background, and this works for presentations and video, but it's the background. It's extremely cluttered. It's a mess. It's too much. I see another thing would be the framing of yourself. You're kind of too close. Your head's getting cut off. It's a weird angle. You're not at eye level. So it looks like, the camera's looking up at you. And what I like to call the witness protection look of having the light behind you instead of the light in front of you, which makes you all in shadow. And we imagine like a crazy little, Darth Vader voice as you speak so that we don't know that you're actually with the mafia.
Very observant. I am still surprised how many people will have one or more of the challenges that are shown in this picture after more than a year of having to communicate virtually. And I sometimes think if you just could record yourself and then try to look at it through the eyes of someone else. And there are a few factors that I call the big five when it comes to your online presence. And I think you mentioned them all. One is camera angle. So the best camera angle typically is pretty much about straight on eye level, sometimes a little bit higher than eye level if you want to reduce that chin, the little double chin there,
right,
but not super high or super low. And then also with how you frame yourself within the video as well can somewhat be dependent on that camera angle. Then lighting. This one seems to be a continuing problem for a lot of people. And it has been a problem for me because I have an office kind of in the basement, and it has a window on one side. And then my overhead light just makes me look like 10 years older. So I've turned off my overhead light, and my husband, who's an amateur photographer, actually has some, I don't know what they're called. They're big lighting
box lights.
But I learned I can't even have them pointed at me because then it's too much of a glare. So I've played around with lighting a lot. In fact, I have another light. I'm going to turn on here just to show you something. If I can get it to turn. Okay, so I have now a little light in front of me, but I don't usually have it on because here's the problem. And it's more noticeable with a ring light. You see the reflection on my glasses? But if you have that problem, there's two things you can do. Number one, just lower your head a little bit and you can get rid of that reflection. Or you can put the light higher so that you don't get that direct reflection on your glasses. I'm going to turn that off now.
Interesting. I also heard another tip too. You can take the arms of your glasses and you can kind of raise them up a little bit,
and kind of
your
tilt
glasses
them down.
Mine
won't just stay that way. So I've learned actually to have the light be less direct works really well for me. If you are speaking mostly during the day and you have a window that has a shade, you can face the window perhaps and get
Yeah.
good lighting. In fact, do you do that? I can't tell. Looks like you might have some studio lights going on.
I'm traveling, so it makes it even more challenging because I don't have any kind of studio or whatever. So everything I'm doing is mobile. So I actually have a ring light, and my ring light collapses, down, and I've just put the ring light right behind my laptop. So
for about the first 6 months, I just used one of these, and I had to put it on a piece of cardboard that I taped to the back of my monitor so I could have it a little bit higher. But
That's
it's
smart.
like $10 little light from Amazon. They're all over. Not the best though, because it was very bright and I had to elevate it so I didn't get that reflection. So play around with the lighting to try to get the best reflection on you. Then the background, as you pointed out in that second photo, usually people don't have terrible backgrounds, but once in a while, even if a bedroom is neat, I kind of don't like to see a bed in the background.
Oh, I agree.
And it just looks like this is too personal.
Yes, you feel like you're intruding.
Yeah, just too personal. The other challenge, because a lot of people I don't have a great place, so I'm going to use a virtual background. Like right now, I'm using a virtual background. However, I also have a green backdrop behind me.
So the green screen?
Yes, it actually goes across the length of my wall. But if you're going to use a virtual background and you do not have a green screen, I will caution you that maybe that's not a good idea. Unless you're very still and don't move very much, you can have the problems, which I'm sure you've seen when people, they turn their head and then their head disappears.
They're like sucked into a void.
Or they'll raise their fingers to show a count and then they're missing fingers or something like that. So, and some companies don't want you to use a virtual background. So it works really well if you have a green screen. And if you don't, I would caution you to be careful. I was just at a meeting yesterday where the speaker did not have a green screen, but used a virtual background. And he was also wearing headphones like these. So if I put these on, you can still see my background even with that. But because he didn't have a green screen, around his head was his actual background, and then there was the virtual background. So it didn't look that great. So just a caution on the background.
Especially with curly hair, because you poof and it doesn't work. It really, curly haired people do not do this. Just move along.
Don't do virtual backgrounds without a green screen, right? So you have a really great background and you say you're traveling. Is that a virtual background?
Nope, it's real. It's just the spot in the house.
Yeah, well, that's the only challenge, and it's not very big of a challenge. I'm not sure if that's a mirror behind you.
It is a mirror. So if anybody gets up and lets out dogs, because there's 3 dogs in the house right now, then you would see them reflecting in the mirror. But otherwise, I'm in an alcove, so usually it's pretty good. And everybody's being real good for the next half hour. They're scarce.
Well, it's a good background, but that does remind me when you said about people getting up and taking the dog out, and that is the whole distraction aspect. That's not even necessarily in the background, but sometimes, and it's really tough because people are working from home and not everyone has a great environment for presenting, but if you can close the door, that would be, in my ideal world for presenting, you would be able to be in a room and close the door for the reasons of sound, for the reason of interruption. In fact, I put a sign on my door when I have an important presentation that says, "Do not disturb." And really the only one who would disturb me is my husband, but he knows not to come in. But it is distracting, when people have kids or they have pets. And if I've left my door open by mistake, sometimes I have a cat that thinks that if the door is open, she should sit on my keyboard. So that's very distracting. But moving on from background, there is clothing. Now, most people make decent clothing choices. Really, you only see from about armpit level up. But do keep in mind that if you want to be professional, you should have at least, a Zoom shirt or something that you can throw on. Like I just threw this jacket on over a black shirt to give a little more professional look. You do have to be careful. I'm going to give you an example. So a couple of weeks ago, I was on a webinar where someone was talking about doing interactive training, and he was doing a great job. However, he was wearing a shirt that had very small vertical stripes. And when it was just him with no slide sharing, it wasn't bad, but I want to show you what it looked like. This is what it looked like when the picture got small. Wow. And he was sharing his slides.
It's like flashback to the 70s.
Yeah, and they were moving. It wasn't just a static pattern. It was like this moving pattern. And I thought, that is a lesson for me not to wear small patterns. The last thing was body language. And there's two aspects of body language, really, how you frame yourself and then your facial expressions. And by framing, it depends on where you are in the frame. If you have a standing desk, it's awesome. I do not. My husband does. That can give you a lot of energy. You could maybe be back a little bit further and have a little more of your upper body showing. But if you're going to be sitting in front of your computer, again, you don't want to be like in people's spaces by being too close. And you don't want to be so far back that you look really tiny or that there's a big space above your head. Ideally, you will take up, the middle portion of the frame with, I like it when the head takes up between 1/3 and 1/2 of the frame and maybe have from armpits up. Some people like, if you have a setup where you can be back a little further and people can see your gestures better, that works too. I have an extremely narrow desk. And if I want to reach my keyboard, which I would suggest having a keyboard that you can move, like if I want to move back, I can move my keyboard. I have a mouse that's also a Bluetooth mouse. So at least I can move those things around. But yeah, so try not to be too low in the frame, too close. Your face should be close, but not too close, because people will engage with you if they can see your facial expressions.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to facial expressions, I would say you want to be congruent. I mean, if you're talking about something very somber, you shouldn't smile. But most of the time, most people could have a more pleasant expression on their faces. And I don't know about you, Jillian, but one thing I've noticed as I've gotten older is that my resting neutral face looks a little bit angry. So even when I try to smile more because I find it more engaging, people know I'm not angry if I'm smiling. And I think, smiles make people look more attractive and younger as well. So
and it helps people when they're talking. If you see a smile and you're the speaker, it just makes you feel so good. Those kind eyes where you just feel like, oh, my message is having some sort of meaning to people. And if you're scowling, then it's like, I don't know, maybe you can't hear, maybe you don't like me, maybe you just have to go to the bathroom. I'm not sure. So it's good to kind of realize you're a reflection for the speaker. And I know I saw a Zoom meeting the other day, and it was probably like 30 people, all in the little boxes on a Zoom meeting recording. And there was one gal that was in the thing, and she smiled the whole time. She made eye contact, she smiled. And I'm telling you, she stuck out, and other people were like down here, they were doing different things. And I just thought, for the person who was giving the speech, I bet you they looked and talked to her.
Right. Well, I hope they didn't. And I'll tell you why. One of the biggest challenges with virtual presentations is making eye contact.
Mhm.
And we have to make artificial eye contact in virtual presentations so that the audience feels like we're making eye contact. And
Yep.
what that means is when you are speaking, for the most part, you should look directly into the camera lens, like I'm doing right now. Now, I can see you nodding your head because I actually have something called, I'll show you just a second. It's called PlexiCam. Let me turn it this way. PlexiCam.
Oh, wow. I don't know about this. This is a cool tool.
And I can't really show it to you because it's on my screen, but what it is, it's like a plexiglass frame that mounts my camera, and I can move it up and down on a platform. So it's not right at the top of my screen. I have it right now, so it's kind of at the top of the live stream, so I don't have to move my eyes.
That's nice.
Too much. So I'm going to stop sharing. I don't need to share that slide anymore. You did say something also, and I wish I could remember what it was when you were talking about, the person smiling. Yes, that does
And
make
the eye contact.
So a few other tips. One would be practice the platform. Some people have been using Zoom for a long time and they've learned a few things, but it's like they've never really practiced it. And if you're using a platform for the first time, like this was my first time being interviewed using StreamYard for a LinkedIn live interview. And thankfully, Jillian, because I was like, I have never done this before. We had a practice session, I don't know, 10 days, a couple of weeks ago, just so it wasn't brand new to me for this interview. And if you practice the platform, you should, if you have an opportunity to practice with family, friends, or coworkers, you can even try out some of the interactive tools. For example, we have tried out the whiteboard and annotations in Zoom calls with our grandchildren. And it was like, wow, I learned stuff just playing around with them. And it wasn't like I had to impress my grandchildren, but it was a very safe environment to practice the tools and also kind of fun as well.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Now, I see that we've got some questions or comments. So let's hop over to those and let's see what we've got. Okay. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for this knowledge. So you're seeing these, right, Diane? You're seeing these comments too?
Over to comments. I do see.
Yeah, it's so and they're showing, should be showing on the screen too. So this is great.
I see it.
Definitely prefer pick number one. So that was the comparison of the two picks. That's absolutely. Peggy Dunn, you will love this. Are you using Big View and or StreamYard still? These tips are super useful for video content, interviews, etc. And that's absolutely true. Everything that Diane said relates to video. If you're a job hunter, this is all really important. If you're going to be, interviewing on Zoom, you want to make sure that you have the lighting right, the background light, because that way you're going to be more comfortable, but you're also creating a better impression, and you don't get a second chance at a first impression. And one of the things for job hunters that I especially would say, if you're going to be using Zoom or Google Meet or, what are all the different platforms that you could actually be interviewing on, learn the tech first so that when you're on the interview, you're calm and you don't have to worry about the tech. You can just focus on your answers. So yes, all of these tips apply to everything. Okay. We have, I agree. Use a Joby light that attaches to my tripod. I'm thinking that's a ring light. Have you heard of that one, Diane?
No.
It sounds like it's a ring light. I think I'm recalling that. Okay.
Oh, and so she wrote, it's not a ring light, and she sent the link.
Oh, okay. Vanessa, what is a Joby light? Is it a ring light? Okay, so we all want to know, what is a Joby light? That sounds cool. Okay, we have, no, it's not a ring light. Here is the link. Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, thanks again. An LED light. Okay, I'm going to have to go do research afterwards. I don't know these things. I love it. Resting bitch.
I know. I tried to avoid that word.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Thank you, ladies. Nice job. Okay. That's super. That's super. Okay. So let me take that. Okay. Super. So one of the questions that I have is, when you are, doing the different platforms and you're doing, virtual presentations, what would you say are the things that you need to keep in mind with virtual versus in person? Like, besides what you already covered, is there any extra tips that it's like, if I'm used to doing presentations in person and now all of a sudden I've been invited to do a keynote speak or something like that, is there anything that I should think beyond what you mentioned?
Well, mainly that everyone is distracted. And they will be distracted during your presentation because almost everybody will have their phone somewhere near them. They could turn it upside down, but the temptation to look is too great. If there is a lull in your presentation or something people aren't that interested about, they might start checking their email. Little tip on that: I have switched everything to dark mode, from Chrome to Microsoft Word to Outlook, precisely so I can sneak a peek at things when there's like a boring part of a presentation without that big flash of light. You know how you bring up a Word document that's white and all of a sudden the light flashes on your face? So I've gone stealth mode and gone to dark mode for all of those things. But the biggest thing is, because people are going to be more distracted, you as the presenter have to adjust your presentation to not be too complicated. Like, people can't go back and read like it's a written presentation. So you have to be very clear in your organization with telling them right up front about a benefit, telling them the points you're going to cover or the outcomes they might expect, and then to use some interactive elements, from telling maybe a few stories or case studies, which really engage people's minds, to using some interactive elements, perhaps asking questions that they would answer in chat, to do the raise the hand. You can even, if their videos are on, you can ask them to physically raise their hand, because then that is an easy thing, but not everybody has their video on. So to know some of the interaction elements that you can use on the platform and plan to use those interaction elements. If you have slides, don't make them super complicated, and don't just do slides for your whole presentation. Because,
break it up a bit.
Yeah, break it up. Maybe just like go video screen for a while to interact with the audience. Gallery view in Zoom where you can look at people's faces. It is tricky to ask questions when you are with a virtual audience. If you ask a question, it's like people are reluctant to jump in because they don't have the visual cues that maybe somebody else wants to jump in first. So I have found, for example, that if I am pretty directive and send people to a breakout room if there's time to discuss something, and tell them that after the discussion, I will be asking for their input on the questions. And if it's a small group, I might say one person per group, choose that person to give input. Because if I just ask a question, usually it will be, unless you're with an extroverted group, crickets. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on polls? Because I know you can do polls in Zoom. What are your thoughts on polls?
I think they're fun. If you're comfortable with the setting them up in advance, that would be, I've used polls, not hugely, but you can set up polls in advance, and it's kind of fun to see how your answer compares with other people's answers. And there are some other interactive tools that I have not used extensively, but I have used Mentimeter. I don't know if
I've heard of that. I've heard of that. Yeah.
And that you can have some interaction with your audience. It does usually requires them to go either on their phone or on the website. Like, I have 3 screens in front of me, so I can easily pull up another website, but most people only have one screen and maybe their phone. but it can be very fun because you can get some live interaction going on as well. And, you know, I just thought of something as my hands are flying in and out of frame about your visual presence as well. So when you're this close, there are some things you have to have consideration for. For example, gesturing with your hands flying in and out, because it just looks really like a blur. So you probably want to, unless you're back further, not use so many gestures. Or, and I always get a kick out of when people gesture like in front of the camera like this, and they'll like, you know, their hands look like monster hands. So if you want to indicate a gesture like a count, instead of going 1, 2, 3, you can put it closer to your, you know, to your shoulder. 1, 2.
Look at that.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a great tip. That's a great
I
tip.
would just, as I was watching myself do this, I'm like, oh yeah, that is annoying, isn't it?
And it's funny. I love the monster hands. That's now going to stay with me forever. So, and it's like, it's funny because I always tell people that, you know, one time I went to a Toastmasters meeting and it was like, I kind of went to Toastmasters thinking, oh, I already know public speaking, until they told me I had T-Rex arms. And I was like, T-Rex arms, that's the worst thing I ever heard.
I know, I had that too. I would like, you know, have the little, you know, this would be my default gesture area. So
all those things you have to take into account. That's awesome. That's awesome. I think we got another comment come in. Let's see. Okay, so we were down here. So let's see. We've got yes, to trigger interaction is the wise one. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, thank you. That is a great suggestion. To encourage interaction helps the viewer feel more like an active participant. And I think it's good for the speaker too, because it's hard to just, you know, like I did once during COVID, I did a presentation. I think it was like 2 hours. It was a LinkedIn training, and it was exhausting for me. So I liked having the breaks so that I could, you know, kind of stop and get my energy reserves. And you can't just keep plowing through. So I think the interaction, so I did purposeful polls to kind of say, how does everybody feel about this section? Because I kind of could have done a choose your own adventure. We could have gone into some case studies if they needed to see it, or if everybody was good, we could move along. So I think that was very good. Okay. To prepare a storyline, Jillian Whitney is a great storyteller herself. So make sure to have a conclusive story to guide the audience with an interactive calls to action here and there. That, I don't know who said that, but thank you. But that's true. And I know, Diane, that's, you know, you are huge in Toastmasters. You're a DTM, correct?
Correct. And several years ago, I was a district director as well.
Oh,
so
wow.
Toastmasters is a great way, especially with most clubs having virtual meetings now, to practice virtual presentation skills and get feedback at the same time.
Absolutely. And it's good because you learn how to do the speaking in the environment. The only hard part about moving Toastmasters online is that you don't hear the clapping, because now you just see people clapping. You don't hear the clapping.
Right. I was in a speech contest, and that is a little disconcerting. It's like the person introducing me said, I can see you and hear you. Can you see and hear me? I'm like, yes. And then she introduced me, and then it was just like, get started with no clapping.
That's hard. That's hard. As a matter of fact, I saw your post. I'm on your newsletter. So I get your newsletter, which I love. And everybody, please go follow Diane, get on her newsletter. It's a great newsletter. She's just got so much stuff, YouTube channel, all sorts of great tips. Everything you do is golden, Diane. And I love all your books. Go read. I've read every book.
Yeah, so
go to Amazon.
Yes. Here's my
it's a fabulous book.
Last year, 100 tips and tricks to appear confident in presentations. And I had started writing it before the pandemic. And then as I was finishing it, I finished it up like in April of last year. So I added 10 tips related to virtual presentations. I thought, well,
that's
might as
fabulous.
well.
That's fabulous.
I just
That's
thought
fabulous.
of something that is a very minor thing, but I have to grab something below my desk.
Okay.
So I want you to think about the difference. People get thirsty during presentations. So I took a drink with a glass of water, but here's some other choices people have. You could have a bottle of water.
Okay.
You could also have something with a straw.
Yeah, I have a straw.
So as I looked at myself doing all three of those things, I would have to say a bottle of water does not look great. You know, you're like lifting your head back, getting a swig. I think to be most professional, I would suggest just a plain glass of water and taking a sip. I don't like how I just noticed, I don't like how I look when I sip with a straw. But that's better than maybe. That's just a minor thing I thought of right now.
That's a good one. That's good. So what I wanted to just mention was you were in a contest and epic disaster in the middle of the contest. Can you just quickly explain that? Everybody, and please afterwards put a link, because I know you made a video about what happened. Here was my speech, but here you were giving a speech, and I don't want to ruin it. Just tell that story real quick, and then we'll probably wrap up. But it was just, we learn from our mistakes, and I want people to get over the fear, because you know what? Stuff is going to happen, but it's how you recover. So can you just quickly tell that story?
Sure. I was in a district speech contest, and in order to be in this contest, I had to win at the club level, the area level, the division level. And I was at the district speech contest giving a 5 to 7 minute speech, very engaging speech about when Santa Claus forgot me one year. And maybe 2/3 of the way through, my Zoom like blinked out and I lost Zoom in the middle of my speech. And then it, as I said, I had 3 screens. It appeared on another screen, but the video was off. So then I just went and turned the video on and repeated the last thing I said and continued on. When I saw that video, I noticed there was about a 15-second break. That's what it was, but the audio never went off. So you hear me in the audio going, okay, I'm glad I didn't say any bad words. But it was like, there was nothing I could do about it. Technical failures happen. There was no point in getting really upset. I had my phone as a backup if I needed to do that, but I did not need to use my phone. You just went on, continued on, and know that technical failures can happen. That particular failure had never happened to me before. So,
wow, that's great. And I think that is the important thing, is to recognize that even when you have written over 10 books, you have courses, this is your job, this is your profession, stuff can still happen. And you just have to accept, what are my backup plans? Always have batteries with you, all those, have checklists, and you actually have a checklist you're going to put in the comments, correct? That people
I will. I have a virtual presentation checklist. It'll be a link, and I will put it in the comments after this presentation is over.
Super, super. That's great. Well, my goodness, I think I have learned stuff. Everybody's learned stuff today. So thank you for being so generous with your time, telling us sort of the top tips, and hopefully, have I passed? Do I pass the big 5? Have I pretty much got everything here?
Great. Yeah.
Okay. Super, super. Okay, great. Well, we'll see everybody next time. I'm not going to do the monster hands. I'll keep them back. See everybody next time. And thank you for joining us today. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.